Unregulated outages from the power company are not acceptable. Your need for a source of power that's reliable 24/7, along with round-the-clock service that can dispatch technicians to your site immediately, is mission critical. Your business needs Charles Equipment Energy Systems on speed dial. These are the big boys, not residential or solar, but reliable industrial generators for emergency backup or events. When you need more than a 100-foot extension cord plugged into a small engine generator, call Charles Equipment Energy Systems. They keep the lights on with rental generators for job sites or power outages. The storm season is here. Plan ahead. Call now to prepare generators for sudden damage and potential power outages. Call 630-834-6000. That's 630-834-6000 or charlesequipment.com. charlesequipment.com.
Listen to AM 560, The Answer, online at 560theanswer.com, on the AM 560 mobile app, on your Alexa-powered smart speaker, on TuneIn, iHeart, and radio.com.
7:38, Team Hochberg Traffic Center time. Jim Telemonte.
Metra has a delay now on the Heritage Corridor line due to positive train control issues. There have been delays on the Union Pacific Northwest line as well. In Lake Forest, southbound 41 is closed at half day 22 due to a crash there. Farther north, there's a collision on 41 in North Chicago at 137. Stevenson Expressway inbound, you'll hit some congestion. Ashland to the Ryan. It's 29 minutes from 355 to Lakeshore Drive. Outbound 28. There are mild roadwork delays in both directions farther south. River Road and Blodgett. You may have some congestion around Wrigley Field. Lakeview Pantry operating a temporary food distribution site there on Tuesdays and Saturdays. That's traffic. I'm Jim Telemonte on AM 560 The Answer.
Worried about basement flooding? It's time to call Permaseal, 800-421-SEAL. Chicago's Morning Answer continues next. Your official Chicagoland weather forecast from our 1-hour heating and air conditioning weather center. Breezy, cooler, partial sunshine, high 51. 36 right now. Next news coming up at 8. Breaking news as it happens. Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan and Amy continues next on AM 560, The Answer.
This hourly segment is brought to you by charlesequipment.com, keeping you powered up no matter what the conditions.
Only the biggest stories, only the biggest guests, and only the biggest opinions. This is AM 560, The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. Tennessee, Georgia, South Carolina, the latest states to announce that they will be coming online in substantial measure in the next couple of weeks. Georgia opening businesses April 24th with some testing, temperature testing required, and Tennessee a week later on May 1st. And in Illinois, couldn't quite get a straight answer from the one-man mass gathering that occupies our governor's office. You did try, though, at the briefing, Amy.
I did.
From Amy Jacobson at WIND, they're in Missouri, for instance. The state is slowly opening May 4th with different phases for different counties. Mm-hmm. Might that be the case here? The governor there is saying, okay, the mayors of St. Louis and Kansas City, they're going to extend their stay-at-home order. Is that something you and Mayor Lightfoot might consider county by county rather than an entire state order?
Sure. Well, Mayor Lightfoot doesn't have anything to do with the other counties or other cities, but I would say that as we make decisions about changing the stay-at-home order or how we can, even after the peak, how we might phase in, people getting back to work or people, reopening things. I absolutely think that we need to look at, where the capacity exists. For example, if the hospital capacity in a certain area is quite large and very available, even with coronavirus in existence, then that might be a place where you could do more, right, than some other place. What's most important, though, is keeping people safe and healthy. And so we're trying to think about, there's a lot of distance, as you can imagine, between people's homes in rural areas of Illinois. And so, the idea of people going outside and wearing a mask, on a property of theirs that might be 100 acres or 10 acres, is much different than the prospect of somebody, on the north side or the west side of Chicago, going outside outside and walking on the sidewalk with hundreds of other people.
So the county by county idea is something you are considering?
Yeah, or region by region, or just done. I think the important thing is.
So you get the picture.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
It's
and
a possibility.
well, you go outside.
That gives hope to a lot of Illinoisans who live, south of I-80.
Yeah, you walk outside on the west side, Governor. You don't need a mask; you need a bulletproof vest. That's the difference here. Also, Lori Lightfoot, she just has responsibility for Chicago. You better alert her to that because yesterday she was commenting on Florida Governor Ron DeSantis.
Yeah, that he's opening up the beaches, which when I heard her say that, I thought, oh, she's never going to open up the lakefront.
She has said his leadership has been wholly lacking in this pandemic, and then he reopened the beaches. God help us all.
Oh, please.
Well,
spare me the hyperbole.
God doesn't need to, well, God needs to help us all. That's true just as a general matter. But DeSantis is doing a pretty good job. So, for example, this will probably come as news to Triple Threat, but she's blasting a state with nearly twice the population of Illinois and only 60% of the deaths. A state that will soon have more Chicagoans than Chicago because of politicians like Lori Lightfoot.
And does she even know that the ban? It's from 6 to 11. You can go on the beach, and then from 5 to 8.
I don't think she really cares. And so the question is, what happens to Chicagoland? I mean, so you couldn't really get a straight answer from Pritzker. I'm thinking about maybe doing something regionally. He went on CNBC later in the day and got a little bit more specific. He didn't give a specific date, but he did give an obvious indication.
Well, let me start by saying that we've got to get past the peak here. We're not past it in Illinois. I'm hoping that peak will come, as some of the models show, in the middle of May. And then, as the president's plan for reopening even says, you've got to have a number of days in a row. I think his suggests 14 days of numbers going down. And that's what we're looking for. In the meantime, our schools are closed, and we're looking at making some alterations to our stay-at-home order so that we can maybe loosen up a little bit here and there, but also looking at, where people ought to wear masks and where we ought to require it.
So that translates to June 1 at the earliest for Chicago Metro.
The earliest. That means you have to have 14 days of decline. So if you have one day with a spike, then we have to start all over again. And I'm not willing to do that.
I thought it was utter madness when Governor Evers, north of the Cheddar Curtain, extended the shelter-in-place order to May 26th, but then I forgot I live in Illinois. Scott Walker, he used to be the governor of Wisconsin.
And people miss him right now.
Oh, they should. And he is now the president-elect of Young America's Foundation. Governor Walker, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Hey, good morning. Good to be with you.
Good morning. So one of the things that, whether it's Evers or Pritzker, a lot of the Democrat governors and mayors, too, de Blasio saying, hey, are you going to bail us out, federal government? Otherwise, we can't open. I don't understand that. So the first thing that needs to, quote unquote, open is state and local government. I thought the first thing that needed to open was the private sector, which funds state and local and, for that matter, federal government.
Amen. I think we're finding the most essential jobs out there have little or nothing to do with government. In fact, the one part of the government that's probably failed us more than anything has been the Congress with this delay on the Paycheck Protection Plan, which is about helping small businesses keep people working, keep people on the payroll, and they can't even get that done. But I think increasingly people are saying they don't need the government as much as they need the small businesses, the grocery stores, the convenience stores, the people who are going into work, and certainly the healthcare providers, of which obviously there's a whole bunch of people on the front line fighting COVID-19, but we forget there's probably one of the biggest groups of people being laid off are healthcare professionals who are not doing COVID-19. And that raises a whole other problem I think has been largely overlooked, and that is if you're not going in for a routine checkup, if you're not going in for other things as your medical professionals, there's a whole wave of people over the past few months and leading into the future who might have gone in and gotten a test that would have shown maybe early stages of cancer, some other disease, and the longer we wait to reopen things, the worse off it gets for people like that. So there's a health issue, even unrelated to COVID-19, that's a problem the longer we stay closed.
Yeah, and putting off surgeries. I mean, we know people at Rush that got laid off that are orthopedic surgeons, and then we know people at Children's, Lurie's Children's Hospital that have been sent home. But you tweeted out something yesterday about hospital admissions that I thought was, fascinating because this push it stay at home order back to Memorial Day weekend, the data is showing that it's trending in a positive direction. Can you explain that?
Yeah. Every day, the Wisconsin Hospitals Association puts out information, and I keep hearing elected officials saying across the country, got to look at data. So I look at the data every day. The total number of COVID-19 patients in Wisconsin as of yesterday is 357. That's a 7-day decline. Over 7 days, that's down 74 patients. Within that number, those needing ICU is 142. That's down 21. And inpatients with COVID test pending, I should say, is down 55. So, and that's as of yesterday morning. It's updated every day. To me, it's inconsistent with what I hear with Governor Evers, and it's similar to what I hear your governor and others, where they say, look at the data, look at the data, look at the data. Well, we saw the largest amount of new COVID-19 cases was back on April 1st when there was 198. It has been down since then. And you mentioned this about Illinois. I would say the same thing in Wisconsin, elsewhere. You're going to have blips here and there, particularly on Mondays, because sometimes the reporting isn't as clear after the weekend. But the trends are what we should be looking at. And the trends overwhelmingly, at least here in Wisconsin, are showing that new cases are going down. And that's why it's beyond me why you would suspend it to Memorial Day or in some cases beyond when, I mean, that's like suspending common sense when you actually see a positive trend out there. Now, flip side is people out protesting, others aren't helping the cause when they're going out without masks on and standing close to people that they don't know or don't live with. We've all got to show that if we're going to open the door for the economy, which I believe we need to start to transition and stagger into, we got to show that we can do that reasonably. And, going out without any caution doesn't help the cause either.
That's fair enough. But, I mean, Wisconsin is not maybe barely in the top 20 states in terms of COVID-related deaths. It's under 4 deaths per 100,000, which is definitely on the lower end nationally for particularly Midwestern states. So it's just a bizarre month-long extension. I mean, he did open the golf courses, which I appreciate because now I have somewhere to play in addition to Indiana. So I'll go,
that's important.
I'll go up and play Whistling Straits in Sand Valley to do my part,
Good
Governor
call.
Walker.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's interesting to me because it seems like with Whitmer, with Evers, with Pritzker, what they've seen is they get all kinds of political credit, and thus their approval ratings improve by overreacting. And so this is their only play, and they're just going to keep making it because there's political benefit to make it. Now the question is that can go down as quickly as it went up, and will it? When do they cross that Maginot line where they start to suffer some consequences for overreacting? And I wonder if you see that happening in Evers' future.
Well, in the bottom line is that they should be making decisions that are right for the people of the state, regardless of political consideration. And to me, I always tell people I'm concerned about 3 things these days. First and foremost, coronavirus. I want us to defeat the coronavirus. I think it's real. I don't think it's the flu. I think there are real challenges with it. And I think it's been appropriate what the president and his task force has done in many regards to help us avoid the massive influx of new cases we're seeing. But we're now starting to see, particularly outside of large urban areas where the Chicago and Milwaukee, most parts of the rest of the state of Wisconsin have few, if any, new cases. That's true of other parts in Illinois and elsewhere around the country. But we got to, one, tackle the coronavirus. Secondly, I'm concerned about the economy, particularly small businesses. I'm concerned there's a ton of small businesses that if we don't start to transition rationally and reasonably into reopening the economy, that those small businesses and the workers that are employed by them are going to be gone. They're not coming back, or they're coming back at a scale that makes it impossible or largely impossible to succeed. And third, I'm worried the more I hear across the country about the encroachment on our civil liberties. Mm-hmm. When people are ticketing people sitting in a car, their own car, listening on a radio to a pastor at an outdoor drive-in ceremony, and they're getting tickets from a police officer, or when you're saying you can't go to your hunting shack in a rural part of the state that you live in, those are real encroachments on our civil liberties. we cannot win this battle if we just tackle one of those three. We've got to fight the coronavirus, and everybody's got to be a part of it. We've got to fight to make sure that we can start to reopen the economy, and we've got to fight to make sure that even in a crisis, our constitutional rights aren't undermined. Now more than ever, that's important.
And one of the other things, too, that I find lacking sort of across the board from political leaders is humility. You can be a great leader and be uncertain of some things. In fact, that's sometimes necessary to be a great leader because you're going to level with people and say, look, here's what we know and here's what we don't know. Here's sort of the risk profile of different decisions that are before us. We're going to have to make a decision. There are consequences associated with one decision. There are consequences associated with another decision. There are consequences associated with no decision and just laying back. But you have to lay it out for people in a way that treats them like adults, and I just see very few politicians doing that.
Oh, I think you're right. I mean, one of the critical things to do at any point in leadership, but now more than ever, is to explain not just the what, but the why. I think early on, if more people across the spectrum had said, here's why we might have to consider stay-at-home orders because this is the trend, this is what's happening, here's how you can do to help mitigate that, more people, particularly here in the Midwest, would have said, hey, we're going to do our part. Excuse me, we're going to do our part. We're going to make sure this doesn't happen. But when you just, unfortunately, I think that's the problem in many cases with elected officials who put their faith in the government and not in the people, is they just assume, okay, we know better. They don't know what they're doing. No, explain to people what comes next. Explain to people how we can make this better. Again, I think in the case of easing the restrictions, I'm not talking about opening up everything today, but easing the restrictions. If you explain to people how this works, I mean, if we can go to the grocery store and not get affected because we wear a mask and we put gloves on and we're careful what we do, why can't we do that with other businesses? Again, if we know what we're supposed to do. Yeah, exactly. It's like we've suspended all common sense out there. And like I said, unfortunately, people who go out and don't abide by, those criteria that the president and others have talked about only empower some of the folks in government who want the government to take on more control. We can stand up and show that we can do it well, and we can protect the health and safety of our neighbors.
And we also should send a message right back to those same people, like I'm going to be lectured about science by J.B. Pritzker. I mean, give me a break.
Yes, people who say it's essential to keep an abortion clinic open, but yet I can't go in to get my checkup that might actually find that I've got an early stage of cancer or some other disease. It just makes no sense out there what they're talking about. We've got to look at the facts, and the facts are showing a positive trend across the country, and it gives us optimism that we can walk and chew gum, meaning we can continue to fight the coronavirus and keep ourselves, our families, our friends, our coworkers, our neighbors safe, and we can start to gradually and reasonably reopen the economy.
And if you have some substantive skepticism or have questions, that doesn't mean you're a neo-Luddite. It means you want an explanation, and you want a second and third level explanation, not just a press release, and that's okay too. And so that the haughty attitude of politicians drives as much of this lockdown protest response as the desire to get back to work and be productive again, I think.
Well, particularly when they just throw out dates. I mean, we saw last week here in Wisconsin when the Evers administration put out May 26th, but didn't tell us why. I actually went, as boring as I am, I went and read the executive order. It was basically a rehash of the first executive order, thankfully acknowledging that the totals, the projections they had made were nowhere near where they were at. But you'd think that might be reason to give pause and say, okay, let's wait till April 30th and re-examine things then. That's kind of what Indiana's doing. In fact, I'm a little shocked for all this talk, remember last week, about a Midwest compact. Governor Eric Holcomb in Indiana apparently moved his date till May 1st. He's going to re-examine things there. Why other states in the Midwest who are part of this compact have pushed it far past that seems to be contradictory to this idea of a pact together out there. But I think it's reasonable to say, hey, we're going to look at the next 2 weeks to see where things are at. But you can't wake up the next day and then suddenly try to reopen the economy. You got to start a plan now. You got to start pushing it. And last week, at least, When Evers' administration said, we're pushing it to May 26th, they didn't give any rationale. They finally this week said, hey, we better create something to justify this.
Right.
But that's what gets people upset, was when you just throw out numbers and don't have any explanation attached to it.
Well,
now more than ever, I get people are frazzled. Now more than ever, people need to know the facts. They need to know why we're making decisions and have a chance to, as you say, question them and ultimately, if they believe in them, buy into them.
Yeah, well, with Whitmer, Evers, and Pritzker, I encourage Reynolds and Holcomb to go on their own, make their own decisions.
Please, yeah.
Scott Walker, former governor of Wisconsin, president-elect of Young America's Foundation. Governor Walker, thanks as always for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks. Be well.
You too. Always a pleasure. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
The stories you need to know to start your day. This is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
Trading involves financial risk and is not suitable for all investors. Past results do not guarantee future performance.
Stock market